button onto a garment. This is a 4-holed flat button. Notice the one side has little indents. That is the right side. This is a 2-holed flat button. It has also right side, but it's more distinct. This is another 4-holed flat button. This one is metal. And this one is a 2-holed flat button. It does not have a distinct right side because both of the sides are near identical. These are the shank buttons. They usually have the hole on the back. Sometimes there isn't necessarily a hole, like this one. It has a cloth back, and the last one has a metal loop. See, metal loop. I'm going to be using the blue button with my garment. If you need the buttons, you can usually find them. One or two of them. These are 2 different sizes for 2 different areas. This is near the hem of the shirt. If there aren't any there, you can take the one near the collar. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a pin, a needle, similar colored thread, and your button. So for this one, I had to remove a button. What you're going to do is you're going to have to gently pull the button away from the fabric, and then you're going to, of course, cut the threads. It is much easier if you use a stitch ripper than a pair of scissors, but if you only have scissors, that's also fine. Be sure to remove any threads that are there if you need to sew something back on where it was. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your pin and put it through one of the buttonholes on the button. And then you're going to pin your button to your garment through the buttonhole on the garment, so that where the button will go through on the one side. Be sure to line the holes up with the rest of the buttons on the garment. And then what you're going to do is you're going to anchor your button with a anchor stitch that's just 1 stitch around, and then you'll remove your pin. That was 1 stitch, and I removed the pin. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch until, in the same 2 holes, until it looks about the same as on the other buttons. Usually that will make it strong enough. And then you're just going to switch to the other set of holes and stitch the same, roughly the same amount. And then with your needle on the back side of the fabric, you're going to push it through behind the button, but on the other side of the fabric. You'll have to wrap the thread around. This will help it last longer as a button. You'll wrap it around about 3 to 5 times. I usually go for about 3, but some people prefer to do a little bit more. And then you'll just push the needle and thread back through again. I'm just checking to make sure it's still going to attach fine before I end my thread. And then I'll be anchoring the thread. I'm just going to push it through, not through where the button is, just underneath, really where I've been working with my thread, so it's all hidden by the button. These stitches are going to be tight. Don't be afraid to pull on the thread. If it's good, it won't break. And as you can see there, you have to be mindful of the other buttons because you don't want to sew them together. It may help if you use a thimble here, because you're pushing through a lot of thread as well as the fabric. It might be hard, so if you use the thimble, you have something harder to push against. And so I'm pulling it tight, and then I'll cut it. Checking to see how well it's attached. So this is the other flat button. I'm going to show you how to do the X stitch on it. So you're going to start the same as the other button. I didn't pin it because I don't have anything really to go with. So usually you'd pin it, but in this case I didn't. And so I did my anchor stitch in diagonal holes, and then I stitch until it's about the same. I used my shirt really as a reference, but you'll want to be sure that it's about the same as the buttons on your garment. It is harder to pull your needle through if it's not kind of anchored in place or pinned in place. So I'll go until it looks about the same as the rest of my buttons, and then I'll switch the holes and go in the other two. When I'm done there, I'm going to pull the needle back out and I'm going to wrap it again. Again, I did about 3 times, and then I pull it back through. And then I'll anchor my thread again and cut. Try not to go through the knot at the beginning where you had your thread tied off, so it doesn't come through the fabric. Knots are very hard to go through. Checking to be sure that it's not going to come off. And cut. So this is one of the shank buttons. They're sewn a little bit differently on the garment. Where you would put a pin, I just used my needle. And when you sew back through the fabric, you're going to want to go in a very similar spot to kind of where it started so it doesn't show as much. Repeat until it's secure. These buttons are typically used for thicker kind of garments like a coat, usually to button it. And see, I had caught it on the other button. You won't need to wrap your thread, just anchor it. So right there, I'm not going through the hole again, I'm just going through the fabric and the thread that I already used. And cut. So this is the cloth-backed shank button. I believe it was used on older styles of clothing. Notice how the needle can go through at any point. It's attached almost the same as the other shank button, but you'll be able to pin it more in place. I didn't pin it because I didn't want to. Again, you're just going to go through roughly the same kind of spot. I did pin this one a little bit, sew this one a little far, so it's a lot more obvious that I sewed it on, as you can see right there. So if you do sew on a cloth back button, you're going to want to have your stitches much closer like I did right there. Again, there's no need to wrap this one, just anchor the thread. Again, don't be afraid to pull that anchored thread back tight. If it's good thread, it's not going to hurt it. If you pull it and it breaks, it's probably not very good thread. and cut. See, still attached. That's not going anywhere. So this is the last button I'm going to show you. This is the 2-hold flat button. It's done the same as the other 2 flat buttons. This one doesn't have any variations in stitching. So you're just going to anchor it in place and then you'll just kind of continue to sew. And this one you are going to have to wrap the same as the other 2 flat buttons by coming back up behind the button but on the other side of the fabric. Wrap it about 3 to 5 times and then anchor your thread again. There are other stitches to use on your buttons. This is me, I'm wrapping the thread around again. Sometimes there are some decorative ones. You could use embroidery floss for some cool colors or to put a flower or something. But if you're just fixing something on a dress shirt, these are the buttons you're probably going to be using, as well as the common stitches used on the shirts. And anchoring my thread. When anchoring your thread, you don't want to have it too far apart because you need to pull them tight. If you have it too far apart, it'll pucker the fabric behind, as you can see with one of the buttons, the cloth back ones, when I pulled it tight. This part, it's just a piece of fabric, so I didn't really care, but you'll just have to be careful of that when you're sewing yours.